But what chance he'll walk to victory in a general election?
Yes, our party is about campaigning, and it's about protest too. But most of all, it's about winning power in local and national government to deliver the real change our country so desperately needs.
So Jeremy Corbyn praised former critics like the Mayor of London.
Sadiq Khan, the first Muslim mayor of a Western capital city.
Didn't seem that impressed. It's not just about unity, though. It's also about dealing with a toxic charge against the party.
This party always has and always will fight against prejudice and hatred of Jewish people with every breath in our body.
And no speech this week was complete without an attack on the billionaire Sir Philip Green.
Well, government might be a bit more efficient if the super rich like Sir Philip actually paid their taxes.
Now, he didn't announce many new initiatives. A rise in business taxes to pay for student grants, a ban on arms sales to Saudi, more power for trade unions, and
I'm announcing that Labour will remove the artificial borrowing cap and allow councils to borrow against their housing stock. That single measure alone would allow them to build an extra 12,000 council homes a year.
And although many of his MPs think it's time for Labour to sign up for immigration controls, that wasn't really his message.
A Labour government will not offer false promises on immigration, as the Tories have done. We will not sow division by fanning the flames of fear. We will tackle the real issues of immigration instead. It isn't migrants that drive down wages. It's exploitative employers and the politicians who deregulate the labour market and rip up trade union rights.
And as for the most important policy challenge of our age, how to leave the European Union, this was largely a policy-free zone.
We're not helped by patronising or lecturing those in our communities who voted to leave. We have to hear their concerns about jobs, public services, wages, immigration, a future for their children. And we have to respect their votes and the decision of the British people.
So what's the coalition of voters that Jeremy Corbyn thinks could take him into 10 Downing Street?
This means being the voice of women, of young people and pensioners, middle and lower income workers, the unemployed, the self-employed, minority communities, and those struggling with the impact of migration at work, and everyone struggling to get on and secure a better life for themselves, their families and their communities. It's the socialism of the 21st century. So I ask each and every one of you to accept the decision of the members, end the trench warfare and work together to take on the Tories.
That was Jeremy Corbyn's most assured performance since he became leader. There's absolutely no doubt that that challenge to him from MPs has made him bolder and more confident. There's no chance of him going anytime soon. Now, he talked of wanting to create a socialism for the 21st century. They love it here in this hall. But will they love it in the country as a whole?
Look how his nation praises thee.
The famous socialist anthem for a party more avowedly socialist.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for inviting me here tonight. The last time I spoke at the Oxford Union, we won the debate. That was about the freedom of the press. The previous time, the Oxford Union showed enormous prescience when in 1994, the Labour Party was debating changing Clause 4 as the dawn of New Labour. The Oxford Union saw through it and supported the original Clause 4 by an overwhelming majority. That proves that a radical tradition is alive and well in this university. And I really don't want to upset my colleague John Redwood with his rather strange analogy of traffic lights and roundabouts. I wasn't quite sure where it was going except in a circular place. But in London, it's his great friend who hates egalitarianism with every pore of his body and supports inequality with every fibre of his being, Boris Johnson, who is actually bringing in traffic lights rather than roundabouts. Maybe you could have a word with him if you get membership of the Bullingdon Club. I'm sure they'd have you now. At last. They obviously missed a chance with you earlier on. If I could just be slightly more serious for a moment, what do we owe to socialism in this country? Every single one of you in this room, at some point, has benefited from the principles of the National Health Service, free at the point of use as a human right. The free market capitalist economy of the United States has 40 million people without access to health care, and the rest have to pay a great deal for it. Where did those ideas come from? Did they come from some benign, very wealthy person, or were they, yes, the dreams of people who saw their mothers dying in poverty, saw their wives dying in childbirth, or saw or saw others suffering grievously because they could not afford medical care. They wanted a communal system that protected everybody from illness and disease.
Health inequality has increased since the institution of the National Health Service, and in particular has widened since the vast increase in expenditure on it. So, at the very least, it is not an egalitarian institution.
Wow. Health inequality has increased since there's been universal provision of the health service. I seriously doubt what you are saying. What I do know is there is health inequality within our society because of poverty, because of debt, and there is a longer life expectancy for the richer than the poorer. There are many things to be conquered in health issues, but the very principle of a health service as a right and free at the point of use is surely something that we can all be proud of. And that, my friends, owes its origins to those socialist thinkers in the 19th century that saw the evils of free market capitalism in Victorian Britain. Think about that. Surely there's something good in that. And you could go on about many other things, such as access to education, such as the development of council housing in the 1920s by the Labour Party particularly, but by those that believed that there should be decent housing for all. The party that is heavily represented by the other side here are presiding over an explosion of free market private rented flats, which now make up a third of my constituency, and the people are being socially cleansed by high rents and insufficient benefits and a refusal of government to bring in any form of rent control. Again, better quality housing leads to better education achievements, leads to better health. There are many things that we owe in our welfare state to the whole ideas of socialism. But I want you to, I'll take one more, yes?
Could you please explain how the moral and socialist principles of the Co-op Bank is so badly miscarried?
The morals and principles of the Co-op Bank are, in my view, it should be an ethical bank, and it shouldn't involve itself in the arms trade, and it doesn't, and it didn't, and it shouldn't involve itself in experimentation on animals, and it doesn't, and it didn't. It has been mismanaged, obviously, and there are a number of us who are customers, if you like, members of the co-op, who do not want it taken over by hedge funds, but want to raise funds in a different way to protect the principle of a mutual bank. But you're in no position whatsoever to lecture anyone about mutuals when you were part of a government that destroyed many of the mutuals in this country, such as Northern Rock, Abbey National and others, that are now part of some big banking enterprise. You promoted greed at the expense of an egalitarian society, and that is everything that Thatcher was about, and you in particular were about as a minister in her government. So I want to bring to you the moral case about socialism. Those people opposite that spoke will have you believe that somehow or other there's something normal and natural in living in a society, whereas Katie says, the dog eats dog, the poorest go to hell and the richest do well. There isn't. There isn't at all. I believe in everybody there is an ounce of socialism. In some people there's a pound. In some people there are many kilos of socialism. Socialism is surely about the kind of society you want to live in. Do you want to live in a society where there is no public provision of any kind of service, there is only private provision, and the only thing to worship is money and getting wealthy at the expense of others? Or do you want to live in a society where there is universal health care, where there is a protection against total destitution and poverty, and every child gets to go to school? Because in many parts of the world they don't. And I want to live in a society that has that kind of collective principle about it. But I also think that we have to have a thought, which hasn't come up very much tonight, about the natural environment in which we live. We live in a free market society to some extent in Britain, to a great extent in the USA, and certainly the domination of the world's multinational companies and banks is very, very powerful indeed. Are they really caring about what happens to the environment? Are they really caring about the level of exploitation of oil and other mineral resources? Are they really caring about the damage they're doing to the environment? It's only if you live in a society and a set of principles where you take from people what they can afford in order to give that to people who need it. So in other words, from each according to their means to each according to their needs is surely a very sensible, very basic principle in life. Since you're getting so excited and so agitated, don't be so abusive. Speak quietly.
That principle found its fullest expression in Eastern Europe, in the Marxist states, which taught that nature was a resource to be exploited and that resulted in the smokestack degradation, which has not been likened anywhere in the capitalist world. The best thing to have happened to the environment was the fall of the Berlin Wall, so that property rights began to reverse the ecological catastrophe that Marxism had created.
Some interesting parts of Marx which you obviously didn't get round to reading about Marx and the environment and about the sustainability of life. I have not actually said anything in defence of the exploitation of natural resource in Eastern Europe or anywhere else. I'm making a point that if we want to survive on this planet, we cannot go on exploiting and polluting at the rate we are. We cannot ruin our environment, destroy an ecosystem, and expect to survive. If you live in a free market society, a free market capitalist society will grab every piece of resource it possibly can, and it won't give a damn about the environmental effects of it. A collective principle where we care for everybody does give us that opportunity to protect the natural world and the natural environment. There were many things wrong. There were many things wrong with what happened in the Soviet Union, and I am not here to defend Stalin or his strange views. What I would say is this, that if you want to live in a decent world, then is it right that the world's economy is dominated by a group of unaccountable multinational corporations? They are the real power in the world today, not the nation state. It's the global corporations. And if you want to look at the victims of the ultimate of this free market catastrophe that the world is faced with at the moment, go to the shanty towns on the fringes of so many big cities around the world. Look at those people, migrants dying in the Mediterranean trying to get to Lampedusa. Why are they there? Why are they dying? Why are they living in such poverty? I'll tell you this, it's when the World Bank arrives and tells them to privatize all public services, to sell off state-owned land, to make inequality a paragon of virtue, that is what drives people away now, and into danger and poverty. And I will conclude with this thought. Think about the world you want to live in. Do you want the dog to eat the dog, or do you want us all to care for each other, support each other, and eliminate poverty and injustice? A different world is possible. Thank you.
There are 3 simple solutions that organizations can take to help their employees really play around with AI tooling to get more comfortable.
evening we had a meeting in Parliament in which Manuel made an incredibly powerful and passionate and effective speech about the history of Palestine, the rights of the Palestinian people. This was dutifully recorded by the thankfully silent Zionists who were in the audience on that occasion, and then came up and berated him afterwards for what he had said. They clearly have two problems. One is they don't want to study history, and secondly, having lived in this country for a very long time, probably all their lives, they don't understand English irony either. Manuel does understand English irony and uses it very, very effectively. So I think they needed two lessons which we can perhaps help them with.
What's the one thing you can't live without?
Coffee.
What's the thing that makes you cry?
Animals suffering, people suffering in poverty and desperation.
What's the thing that makes you laugh?
Good comedy, good jokes. Makes me laugh is children being happy.
What's the person, the hero that you'd want at your table?
Oh, it's going to be a very big table for all my heroes, but there's many people I deeply admire. Historically, Mary Wollstonecraft, historically Salvador Allende, historically Nelson Mandela, historically some of the African writers like Chinua Achebe.
Favourite film?
Casablanca.
And the question that you most often get asked that hates...
No, not Casablanca. Sorry, no.
This is the Nick Hornby moment now.
I like The Great Gatsby because it's so absurd, and I like really long films, but I don't watch them very often.
Okay, last one. The question that you get asked the whole time and hate.
Oh, it's all personal stuff about your life. I hate it. I don't want what you do in your spare time, what your hobbies are, and all that kind of thing. It doesn't matter. I'm proud to represent my community, proud to be politically active, and proud to be somebody that also does other things in life. I read, I make things, I go places.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Some of your supporters feel passionately that Tony Blair should be tried for war crimes. Do you?
Chilcot report's going to come out sometime. I hope it comes out soon. I think there are some decisions that Tony Blair has got to confess or tell us what actually happened. What happened in Crawford, Texas in 2002 in his private meetings with George Bush? Why has the Chilcot report still not come out? Because apparently there's still debate about the release of information on one side or the other of the Atlantic. And at that point, Tony Blair and the others that have made the decisions are then going to have to deal with the consequences of it.
So should he be tried for war crimes?
If he's committed a war crime, yes. Everybody who's committed a war crime should be. I think it was an illegal war. I'm confident about that. Indeed, Kofi Annan confirmed it was an illegal war, and therefore he has to explain to that. Is he going to be tried for it? I don't know. Could he be tried for it? Possibly. But
you would like to see him tried for war crimes?
I want to see all those that committed war crimes tried for it, and those that made the decisions that went with it. It's going to be a very different structure. The Labour Party is a very top-down, highly centralised party that is full of control freaks who want to control whatever goes on within the party.
You were at the top at that time. You could change.
Yes, I did a great deal to try and change that by establishing community organisers, and during my leadership of the party the membership went up to 600,000, the largest ever in its history. I'd be surprised if it's even a third of that figure now. They refuse to reveal what their membership is. We're not going to be a party that's controlling everybody in every aspect of what they do. What we want is the excitement of communities, what they're doing to develop and improve their own lives, their own communities. This is going to be community-led, community-based, grassroots-led. This is going to be very different, and you know what? It's going to be fun. I'm old enough to remember when the Tory party opposed the national minimum wage legislation.
We were wrong. We were wrong, Jeremy. We were wrong.
Thanks. I remember it very well. I'm old enough to remember when the Tory
Zara Sultana, the Coventry South MP, who's been suspended from the Labour whip since last September, has just announced that she's resigned from the Labour Party after 14 years as a member. And she said this: Jeremy Corbyn and I will co-lead the founding of a new party with other independent MPs, campaigners and activists across the country. Zara Sultana,
I voted Labour, but I think you've heard of the Omni-shambles, but this is our Omni-shambles.
Well, why? I mean, if you leave aside winter fuel, it just seems like everyone was just like a fight in a pub where everyone has 8 pints and they just start kicking the nearest person in glasses.
No, what's happening is this Iron Chancellor business and cuts and attacks on the poor. This isn't the Labour government. I keep feeling I've voted for reform by mistake.
Well, you think they're very right-wing, do you?
Well, I think they're more right-wing than Sunak. I thought he was bad enough.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I hadn't thought of that, Lynn. I mean, they don't come over as very right-wing to me.
I don't feel that they're right-wing. I think they're classic champagne liberal sort of left-leaning that pretend to want change, pretend to be the socialist, pretend to be for the working man. But when it comes down to it, cronyism, nepotism, all the rest of it.
I voted Labour.
For each other, as much as for the individual, are as valid now as they were from the very early socialist ideas that come forward. Socialism is actually a natural way and a sensible way of doing things, that you work collectively. Because at the end of the day, we are not islands. We all depend on each other for our own very existence. And so I think socialism is the way forward. If we're to deal with the massive issues of inequality across the world, massive issues of environmental destruction that's taking place, and the massive issues of people simply trying to get somewhere to live, it can't all be done by free market economics and extolling the super wealthy.
Mr. Q. At Mr. Q Casino, when players win, they love Q. When players lose.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here this morning on what is people coming together sent a powerful message of solidarity and love. It was a profound human impulse to stand together, caring and strong. And you know, it was actually very, very inspiring. In the past few days, we've all had perhaps thought a bit more about our country, our communities, and our people. The people we have lost to atrocious violence or who've suffered grievous injury, so many of them heartbreakingly young people. Those young lives will never come back. The people who we ask to protect us and care for us in emergency services, who yet again did our country proud. The police, firefighters, paramedics, nurses and doctors, people who never let us down and deserve all the support that we can give them. And the people who did their best to help on that dreadful Monday night. The homeless men who rushed forward to carnage to comfort the dying. The taxi drivers who took the stranded home free. The local people who offered comfort and even their homes to the teenagers who couldn't find their parents. Any of us who are parents can understand the unbelievable trauma of knowing your children are at a concert and you know a bomb has gone off and you don't know what's happened to them. They are the people of Manchester. But we know that attacks like the one at the Manchester Arena could have happened anywhere, and that the people in any city, town or village in Britain would have responded in exactly the same way. It is these people who are the strength and the heart of our society. They are the country we love and the country we seek to serve. That is the solidarity that defines our United Kingdom. That is the country I meet on the streets every day. The human warmth, the basic decency and kindness. It is our compassion that defines the Britain I love. And it is compassion that the bereaved families need most of all at this time. In Manchester, they proved to be the best of us. Austerity has to stop at the accident and emergency ward and at the police station door. We cannot be protected and cared for on the cheap. There will be more police on the streets under a Labour government, and if the security services need more resources to keep track of those who wish to murder and maim, then they should and they will get them. We will also change what we do abroad. Many experts, including professionals in our intelligence and security services, have pointed out the connections between wars that we've been involved in or supported and fought in other countries, such as Libya, and terrorism here at home. That assessment in no way reduces the guilt of those who attack our children. Those terrorists will forever be reviled and implacably held to account for their actions. An informed understanding of the causes of terrorism is an essential part of an effective response that will protect the security of and secure an outcome that delivers lasting peace. That is my commitment to our armed forces. That is my commitment to our country. I want the solidarity, humanity and compassion that we've seen on the streets of Manchester this week to be the values that guide our government. There can be no love of country if there is neglect or disregard for its people. No government can prevent every terrorist attack. If an individual is determined enough and callous enough, sometimes they will get through. But the responsibility of government is to minimize that chance, to ensure the police have the resources they need, that our foreign policy reduces rather than increases the threat to this country, and that at home we never surrender the freedoms we have won and that the terrorists are so determined to take away. Too often, government has got it wrong on all three counts, and insecurity is growing as a result. Whoever you decide you should lead the next government, they must do better. Today, we must stand united. United in our communities, united in our values, and united in our determination not to let triumph those who would seek to divide us. So, for the rest of this election campaign, we must be out there, demonstrating what they would take away. Our freedom, our democracy, and our support for one another. Democracy will prevail. We must defend our democratic process, win our arguments by discussion and debate, and stand united against those who would seek to take our...
Socialists don't like people to do things for themselves. Socialists like to get people dependent on the state. You never build a great society that way. We were the first country to attempt and to succeed in rolling back the frontiers of socialism, which is the first cousin to communism. Socialists don't... That was the thing I couldn't get over. They said to me as I went through it, but you haven't been to ask us to vote for you. Other people have. And I thought, goodness me, do I, after 11.5 years, have to go and ask personally for a vote. I remember previous leadership elections, but there you are. That was the thing I couldn't. But unless you have freedom of discussion over a whole society, you soon cease to have any new ideas. Don't you find that new ideas develop when you can talk about them with other people? If you can't discuss them freely because there is a correct view, you soon cease to have new ideas. But unless you have...
Don't follow the crowd. Let the crowd follow you. Margaret Thatcher.
You don't tolerate absence of freedom. By the time freedom is absent, you've no choice about anything. Your only choice is to fight for it while you've still got some. Your only choice is to point out that if at each time you go on further along the socialist road, nearer and nearer to the communist state, then the consequences of the communist state will follow. You don't
I give way to the honourable gentleman.
There is no doubt that the Prime Minister has in many ways achieved substantial success for the economy. There is one statistic that I understand is not, however, challenged, and that is that over her 11 years, the gap between the richest 10% and the poorest 10% in this country has widened substantially.
That's right.
How can she say at the end of her chapter of British politics that she can justify many people in a constituency such as mine being relatively much poorer off, much less well housed, and much less well provided than it was in 1979? Surely she accepts that is not a record that she or any Prime Minister can be proud of.
Mr. Speaker, all levels of income are better off than they were in 1979. But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services as we have. And what a policy! Yes, he would rather have the poor poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That is the Liberal policy. Yes, it came out. He didn't intend it to, but he did. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm extremely grateful. The Prime Minister is aware that I detest every single one of her domestic policies and I've never hid that.
And I think that the honourable gentleman knows that I have the same contempt for his socialist policies as the people of East Europe who have experienced it have it for theirs. I think I must have hit the right nail on the head when I pointed out that the logic of those policies are they'd rather have the poor poorer. Once they start to talk about the gap, they'd rather the gap were that. Down here. That. Not that. But that. So long as the gap is smaller, so long as the gap is smaller, they'd rather have the poor poorer. You do not create wealth and opportunity that way. You do not create a property-owning democracy that way.
I believe you won't keep political freedom unless you also have economic freedom, which means that you must have a large part of free enterprise in your whole economy. We've had a large number of increasing restrictions, and you've been finding two things. First, that we are more and more concentrating on redistributing the wealth we've got rather than creating any more. To create more, you need a slightly freer society and you need an incentive society. Naturally, when I see that happening, I look with very great alarm to societies which have gone even further left. That is, they've tried to redistribute even more and haven't had the incentives for people working hard on their own account, doing well for their families, and often then being able to create jobs for others. They've produced a much more prosperous society than we have. But by and large, you've got the two broad, different economic and political approaches.
In a recent, and if I may say so, very moving talk that you gave on Ian MacLeod, you quoted the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Mr. Callaghan, who said in 1960, "I have not the slightest doubt that the economic measures and the socialist measures which one will find in the countries of Eastern Europe will become increasingly powerful against the uncoordinated, planless society in which the West is living at present." Now, we assume that since 1960, Mr. Callaghan has learned something, right?
It would be impossible not to, I trust.
Oh, no. I know lots of people who haven't learned anything since 1960.
I hope they never come on your program.
Well, I wish some of them would. I don't think Mr. Brezhnev has learned a great deal since 1960.
Because then, you see, they have no free play of ideas in that society. That's one of the points that I started with.
Well, no, Brezhnev is allowed to read. He has a secret library in which he can read the Reader's Digest.
Yes, indeed. But unless you have freedom of discussion over a whole society, you soon cease to have any new ideas. Don't you find that new ideas develop when you can talk about them with other people? If you can't discuss them freely because there is a correct view, you soon cease to have new ideas. Now, the interesting thing, I think, in the Soviet Union is that a good deal of the different views come from people who have to be trained to think in the scientific sphere, because Russia would never have had some of her achievements. After all, she did get up the first Sputnik, unless she'd trained people to think in the scientific sphere. Now, you can't train them to think in maths and science without having the power for thought and thinking new ideas spilling over. And it's interesting to me, you see, that a lot of your people who've been thinking new political thoughts unwelcome to the regime have often been those who've come from the scientific sphere. And I think in many ways American politics have been, well, they are very different because you've two parties based on a free society, or free enterprise society and economic freedom. We've one party based on that, one main party, and another one based on socialism. But you see, for years now in British politics, this word, you must use it, consensus, has reared its head. You must have a consensus. It's a word, again, you used not to use when I first came in politics. We had convictions. And we tried to persuade people that our convictions were the right ones. And it's no good having convictions unless you have the will to translate those convictions into action. But politics was more, if you had convictions, than a matter of multiple maneuverings to get through the problems of the day. I often think when you're going for consensus, so often it means that those who believe, as I believe, tend to give in to the left wing, and you steadily move further and further left. Now, I'm in politics because of conviction, but I know that the last election, the previous election, was fought in Britain on what I think is one of the most damning sentiments ever uttered. And it was by the predecessor to Mr. Callaghan, Harold Wilson. What the British people wanted, he said, was a bit of peace and quiet, anything for a quiet life. Now, you know and I know that this is the great drag on democracy. That people will say, does my voice count? Can I do anything? And therefore they leave it to a tiny, well-organized minority. Now you ask, have people learned? Yes, they are learning that if you do leave it to that tiny, well-organized minority,
Unpleasant things happen.
Unpleasant things happen, and you then recoil from that. In part, you expect your politicians to do something about it. The question is whether the people themselves will back up the politicians.
What is it that ultimately transforms experience into guidance? I give you a recent example.
It's conviction and determination.
Well, it's also surely it's a hierarchy of values, isn't it? Because if by experience you find that you lose a certain amount of liberty in return for a precarious security,
yes, you decide what matters to you.
Mind, then you don't.
Yeah, you call it a hierarchy of values. I say what matters to you. And if I lose liberty, then it takes away the basic reason for living.
So what is
if you're the sort of person who doesn't mind about having any liberty, provided you've got a house and food coming to you and you will do what you're told to do, then perhaps you won't mind. I suppose it's the difference between being born free and living life like an animal at the zoo in a cage.
Yeah.
All right. Some animals do live lives in cages. But I mean, for me, freedom is part of life. It's all. Well, I only use that as an example to show the difference between you can have total security without any freedom.
Sure. But now, I was about
to some people, that would be attractive, not to me at all.
I was about to give you an example of something recently written by an eminent professor of economics called George Stigler, the University of Chicago. And he said, there are a few things that economists know with the force of certitude. There are a huge number of things about which we are very vain that we don't know at all. But certain things we do know. And one of them, for instance, is that minimum wages will not raise the level of income. Now, he said, any further demonstration of this is entirely supererogatory. It's just known. However, neither the Republican Party in America nor the Democratic Party would ever dare to come out in opposition to the minimum wage because the superstition is endemic that the minimum wage actually elevates the income of poor people. In fact, poor people are precisely who are hurt by a minimum income. Now, in the British experience with socialism, there must be counterparts to the minimum wage. Things that, as you pointed out in that heated exchange last week, on which I congratulate you, by the way, with the Prime Minister citing all of his predictions over a period of 4 or 5 years, each one of which turned out to be wrong. Question, what is it that people learn from this experience, or is there something that prevents them from learning in the light of the depreciated value of human freedom?
I think there are two things. Well, there's an awful lot in what you said, and I'll just try to remember it all. But you can learn quite a lot from experience. That's one thing. There's something after that. Have you the will and determination to do anything about it?
Why should you not have?
Well, I'm afraid some people don't.
I mean, just the lack of the exertion or the risk?
The exertion. They would prefer to take the easy way. The hard way is tough by definition.
Yeah.
Many people would prefer to have it easier. Anything for a quiet life.
Yeah.
What the British people want is a bit of peace and quiet. Others of us know we can rise to higher and better things than that and believe that's part of our purpose in life. So there are two things. One, you recognize what is happening. Two, are you prepared to do anything about it? Now, you make the point about minimum income. I think in societies where there are enormous differences between very great wealth and very great poverty, I would recoil from that.
Recoil from what?
From enormous differences between very great wealth in the presence of very great poverty. No. Yes, but it has. One moment.
What?
You wait, I'm coming to that. So, there is therefore something to be said for a certain amount of redistribution there by taxation, and you've done it as well as we have. This is what taxation is about. So you do a certain amount of redistribution from those. Well, yes, I know you're getting very irritated, but just wait one moment. From those to try to help people who are poverty-stricken to get up off the floor and raise their standard. And we would call that not a minimum wage. Yeah. We would call that a basic safety net. And we would accept a moral commitment in a kind of society like yours or ours that jointly we do try to guarantee some basic standard of life. And indeed, rather more than a basic standard of life. But there are certain benefits you can get from Social Security, and we both agree on that. Now, what has happened to us is that the redistribution process has gone on so much further that the standards here, say in earnings, are our lowest income earners earn about half average earnings, and our top in net take-home pay, our top income earners only earn about 4 times. So that's a comparatively narrow gap. As a matter of fact, it happens to be narrower than in Soviet Russia. Now, once you compress the incentives from the top down and say it doesn't matter how much you earn, I'm going to take the lion's share away from you, then they say, all right, I'm no longer going to do the lion's part. And then they stop creating the extra wealth, which